This is October 10th meeting of the City of Jefferson Historic Preservation Commission. My name is Alan Weed. I'm the chairperson of the commission. We'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Aaron, our councilman.
Aaron Ely, Council, 2nd Ward.
Brian Warren.
Donna Dietz.
Deborah Green.
Brad Schaefer.
Tiffany Patterson.
Rachel Senzi, city staff.
Clint Smith, City of Jefferson, Plan Protection.
Dawn Kirshner, city staff.
Thank you. The city code authorizes 9 regular members. A quorum of 5 members is necessary to conduct business. I declare that a quorum is present. Law awards online. All right. And the only member that we're absent tonight then is Amanda Williams. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda as printed?
So, second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
You also have a copy of the September 12th, 2023 minutes. We have a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Okay. First and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Any old business?
No.
New business, demolition clearance review, public hearing over 100 years, 722 East McCarty Street. Any demolitions 100 years or older are required to have a public hearing before the commission makes its recommendation. First, will we please read the format of the hearing in order of this?
Yes. The purpose of a public hearing is to allow the applicant and all other interested parties a reasonable and fair opportunity to be heard, to present evidence relevant to the application, and to have an input in the process. The conduct of the hearing. Any person or persons may appear at a public hearing and submit evidence, either individually or as a representative of an organization. Each person who appears at the public hearing shall state for the record his or her name, address, and if appearing on behalf of an organization, the name and mailing address of the organization. The order of the proceedings shall be as follows. The director or appropriate staff member shall present a description of the application and required findings, if applicable. The findings shall address each applicable factor required to be considered prior to action or approval of the application. The applicant may present any information that the applicant deems appropriate. Public testimony shall be heard first in favor of the proposal, then in opposition to it. The director or other staff member may respond to any statement made by the applicant or any public comment. The applicant may respond to any testimony or evidence presented by the staff or the public, and the body conducting the hearing shall close the public portion of the hearing and conduct deliberations prior to acting on an application.
Rachel, do you have any exhibits?
The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting. The city code of the City of Jefferson as amended, copies of applications under consideration, copies of drawings, plans, and or renderings under consideration, letters of memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Historic Preservation Commission. These items are all public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. The comprehensive plan and land use map is also used. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and
We'll open testimony for the public hearing for 722 East McCarty Street, giving staff reports.
Thank you. The nature of the request, there was an application for demolition received for the structure of 722 East McCarty Street. The purpose of the request is to demolish the property. According to Midway GIS, the structure located at 722 East McCarty was constructed in 1910. When going through the staff analysis, the Historic East Survey had identified the property as contributing to the potential district. It was not considered eligible originally. It also, in reviewing section 8-43F, criteria in the structure holds sufficient historical significance in in terms of subsection C, its embodiment of distinctive characteristics of the type, design, period, or method of construction. And subsection F, it contains elements of design, detail, material, or craftsmanship, which represent a significant construction innovation. So to make that clear, this property is National Register eligible because of its surrounding neighborhood. So the demolition of it would create a gap in that continuity of all the other structures that are on the house. However, based on the on section 8-43F, subsection 3A, it requires the Historic Preservation Commission to consider the state of deterioration, disrepair, or structural unsoundness of the structure and the practicability of rehabilitation. The Historic Preservation Commission may request the applicant to submit documentation or other information necessary to determine whether the property can be rehabilitated or restored with a reasonable economic return to the owner. Based on the assessed property value and the location of the property being in a qualified census tract, it is staff's opinion that a reasonable economic return on restoration or rehabilitation of the property is improbable. In this instance, the threat of demolition by neglect may have a greater negative impact on a potential National Register district more so than a spot demolition. Infill development of this site should be monitored by city staff in order to mitigate negative impacts of the demolition and any new construction. The current zoning of the property is RA2 residential. And I'd be happy, I've been flipping through pictures on the screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do any commissioners have questions for Rachel?
My guess, and you can confirm or deny this, is that this lot is so narrow that redevelopment of it is unlikely.
40 foot.
It would, I'd have to check zoning, but I believe it would have to maintain the footprint of the existing structure if it were to happen. I believe, and I'll have to double check, I believe that you have to have a 50-foot requirement in this section.
I think that's what it is.
Sure.
So the property will be potentially demoed, but they can't put another structure on the lot?
So there is a possible for the narrow infill lots, you have the ability to like put like for like back, same footprint. But if you wanted to like tear down and build a larger structure, that would be a no. But I will note that the property owner is here, so if you have some of those questions, I would direct those towards him.
Any more questions for Rachel or questions for the staff? Okay. Okay. Would the applicant like to present the case? If you'll come to the podium and introduce yourself, please.
My name's Bill Meyer. Currently, I also own 724 East McCarty, which is on the east side of this property. Because the lot is so small, that the 722 house was built approximately 12 to 18 inches from my property line. Is where that house is actually sitting. Our intent after demolition is actually the owner of the property on the other side, 718 East McCarty, and I will be splitting the lot, and the lot will be allocated between the two properties, and so nothing else could be built on this per se. The intent is the Morrisons, which own 718, are going to have some off-street parking on the first 40% of the lot, let's say. The back 60% will remain a yard at this point in time for me. I'm hoping to put a garage in, but my wife says yard. I'm really not sure of any other questions you might have, but I do know the lot is just so small with the 10-foot setbacks and all that type of stuff, you just couldn't build on that lot.
Christine?
I think this is more a question for staff. What he's proposing for the lot, is that legal?
With the driveway, I mean,
That would be a question for our planning manager, for Eric Aaron. And I do know that the applicant has met with him.
I met with Eric as well as Mr. Morrison that met with Eric before we ever closed on the property and indicated yes. Basically, they did not want painted lines for parking, but other than that, it was they had no problem with it.
Because there's an existing curb cut there,
I'm
correct?
sorry?
There is an existing curb cut already on that, on 722, correct?
Yes.
Do you have anything else to share with us?
Only if you have more questions.
Anyone have any questions for him?
if it gets pulled down, would you agree to have HCJ come in and salvage, because the inside of that building looks like it's got good wood structure, doors, et cetera?
The doors I have removed at this point in time. They're sitting in there ready. But when they do demolish, I was going to take them all to Habitat. There's four doors.
There's some other things in there too. Don't touch. The only other, I could not see on this. I can't tell the structure underneath. You said that it's not structurally sound.
Basically, when you try to walk across I'll call it the main floor, you could be up and down as much as 6 inches. It moves that much.
It actually moves.
Well, not moves, but you're actually, you start walking down, and then start walking back up. The upstairs, I believe that was probably constructed by the previous owner himself. And obviously you've seen the stairs going upstairs was almost probably a 60% angle, 60-degree angle, so.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this request? You'll give your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Ethan Morrison. I'm the property manager at 718 East McCarty, and my parents are co-owners of Mr. Myers, 722. Just the only thing to add is we think if demolition is allowed, that we would like to promote more sustainable housing for any possible tenant or future resident at 718 East McCarty by providing the off-street parking. I don't have anything further.
Is 718 a duplex?
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have anything to say in favor of this request? Okay. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Seeing none, we will now close testimony. Rachel, staff.
Unless you have any questions.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Rachel at this point? Okay. All right, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? The motion must be in a positive format.
I move to approve the application for the demolition of the structure located at 722 East McCarty Street.
So we have a motion, do we have a second? Second. All right, so we have a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Don, will you do a roll vote?
Brian Warren,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes. You have two more.
With Tiffany and.
Tiffany.
Oh, sorry, Tiffany.
Brad.
Well, I already had them checked because.
Laura.
And Laura.
And
Laura.
Aye. Thank you, Laura.
Aye.
Tiffany.
Yes.
And Brad.
And Brad.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next we have 419 West Miller Street, which is also 100 years or more in regard for public hearing. Rachel, will you please read the format?
The nature of this request is an application for demolition of the structure located at 419 West Miller Street. Minmo PIS had the structure located at 419 West Miller Street. It was constructed in 1910. After hearing some feedback from our commission members, we did a deep dive on research. I could not find existence of the building until the 1904 city directory. It was not in Sanborn maps because that was not within city limits at that time, nor was it in the 1900, 1890, or 1880 census identified as a residence where somebody would be counted. And I think the applicant will provide more detail on some of the questions that some of the commission members had brought up earlier in the meeting. So based off of the evidence that we found, the property has not been surveyed for National Register. The property was found in the 1904 city directory. No significant events transpired on the property. In reviewing section 8-43F criteria, the structure does not appear to hold sufficient historical significance in terms of heritage, cultural, or architecturally. 419 West Miller Street was constructed circa 1904 as a residence. Current zoning of this area is C2 General Commercial District. Future land use in the comprehensive plan in the historic South Side Old Munisburg plan is identified as commercial. So the staff is recommending approval of the demolition request.
You have a list of exhibits.
I do not, but I believe the applicant brought some.
All right, so testimony is open for public hearing. Do you have any other reports for us?
I do not. I am going through some of the photos that was provided with the initial application.
All right, do any commissioners have questions for Rachel?
Just to clarify, this is right behind where Eris's Bistro strip. Okay.
Right by
Any other questions for Rachel or for staff? Would the applicant like to present the case? Introduce yourself at the podium, please.
My name is Mike Bernskitter. What are the other questions you want to know?
Well, what would you like to tell us?
So my initial, we own a business at 429 West Miller, and my initial, we wanted to buy it because it was close to our business, and I was planning on using it for rental property, but then when I actually saw it, I realized it can't be used for rental property. I don't know what that one picture is.
Yeah, that seemed.
That one picture is not the house. That's not it.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I realized it couldn't be rehabbed and used for rental property, so we just decided to tear it down. There actually is a garage in the back that we could use for storage and stuff, but the house isn't salvageable, so we're going to tear it down. And we've had people living along the creek there beside us, and we actually had another house. If you're looking at our business to the right of us, people were living in that, and they tore it down. But it's, like I said, it's not salvageable, so we were just going to tear it down and use the garage for storage.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have had several phone calls from folks telling me that there is, within the front square of that building, that there is a log cabin. Have you guys investigated that or know if it is or?
Hi, Rena Custer with Mid-Missouri Earth Movers. I spoke with Rachel last week and she brought that up. We did go in the building this room here, actually, which is the very front of the house.
Right.
It's the living room. There's a partition there that obviously was built after. So just this first section of the house is a log house. I have some pictures here if you guys want to see. The back part of the house, more than the back, but you'll see from the pictures, has been added on. It is not. So that one room and then an upstairs, the pitch of the roof has been changed, so not the entire upstairs, but there are logs there if you guys would like the pictures. So this front section is about stepped off 20 by 25 where it would be, and then they're pretty self-explanatory. You can pass them around.
Let's do this one first. Do you have anything else to share with us on that?
I do not. Any questions?
What would be the plausibility of when demolition is starting to take place of that cabin being moved to another location?
Looking at the pictures, they're not in great shape from what we can see.
Mm-hmm.
Moving, I don't know. I mean, there's always the possibility of being able to take them down. That wouldn't be included in the price that I gave the burn scatters because,
Oh, I know.
we didn't. It could be added in, probably not at their expense, but that could be added in if you do want to remove the board step by step, actually physically moving the structure. I'm not sure how viable that would be. They don't seem to be in that great a shape.
From your pictures, it looks like it probably fall apart.
I think it probably would. I think there's some termites.
That's what I was wondering.
Right, it looks like there's some termite damage from what I've seen. But we haven't gotten completely into it, obviously.
Rachel, how would we track any kind of history on something like that, on the log cabin piece, any kind of information? Is there any way to do it?
I mean, we could take a deeper dive into, going into the archives and some of but just on the normal places that I go to look, I didn't see anything before 1904 city directory. So I'm not sure if it was like a commercial structure originally, so there wouldn't have been anybody living in it, but usually those still show up in the directory, so I'm not really entirely sure why.
We couldn't, honestly, we couldn't find anything else either on the history of it. That's why, see if you all had any better luck.
And Don, if you guys would like to go in before we demo, you're okay with that, right? If you wanted to go in and find, I know there's a really cool light switch on that front wall. Right? I mean,
HCJ's gonna get anything that we can get for other people.
It's a turn one. I've never seen one like, even on all the ones we've done on Capitol, I never saw a light switch like this one.
That would be cool.
But beyond that, I mean, there really isn't much. There's trim work. I mean, I think it's just, when it was added on and people covered up, and I'm not sure how much is there, but
oh yeah,
I'm okay if they're okay with that.
Yeah, I know they would be.
I have no problem with that. I mean, we had.
I'm just trying to capture what it was before we find out.
We've taken care of it. If it can be fixed up, we can fix it up, but it can't be fixed up.
Yeah, from the pictures that can't be from rebuilding logs.
Right. So any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of the request? Anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of the request? You'll identify yourself, please, and your address.
You bet. I'm Tom Meeks, live at 912 Oakwood Drive in Jefferson City. I own 222 West Dunklin and 210 West Dunklin. I also own two businesses, Rosewood Music, and I own a small company called Vintage Homes. So we've renovated several buildings around town. My concern here is not to stop the demolition. It's to make sure that everything's taken care of, it's supposed to really look at. The outside of that building, have we had DNR look at it?
It is because there is asbestos, we're gonna take down the siding and encapsulate it. Because they don't have, it's not contiguous, they don't have more than one structure.
Right.
You don't actually have to, but we are going to do that because
Because it doesn't violate the state code because
Correct.
it's a single, right?
Yes.
Right. So my concern was that, and you are going to encapsulate it. I was worried about the neighborhood in terms of watering it down. You know, there's a restaurant right there.
Correct.
You're gonna put all that inside.
Right, we're gonna try to get it down with, you know, each piece and not break them as much as we can, so yes.
The only thing I would look at, we talk about log, okay? I do have contact that if it's a viable log, they may be interested in taking the log. So if that'd be willing to do it before you I was worried about demolition. We've done it around town, we've gone with the bulldozer and just knocked it down. And we've lost a lot of stuff, stones. You guys know it better than I do. So as to make sure that we did not lose it that way, that if there's logs there that are viable, and my guys do that professionally. So I would ask for at least time to assess the logs and see if they can be taken before we can knock down. Because I get it, it's probably not, you could always salvage it, but it's not gonna be economically salvageable. You know, it's like the other property. I mean, how much money can you put into it in small footprint? So, did they actually test it? Is it asbestos? Do you know? The outside?
Siding, yes.
Okay, I thought it looked like translite.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only thing I was concerned then at this point in time to make sure could it be moved? That would save them the money if you could get somebody to salvage the logs and to move it. Now, if only the front part is logged, it's not gonna come off the front part of that lot, so you're gonna have to take it out the back. But if it's only that what do you think, front 2 rooms, is it?
It's really one room. There's a partition in it, but it's one log.
Okay.
It's a log front.
One front log. All right. I just asked for time to make sure we got a salvager that'd be willing to take it if we could take it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
To follow up with that, and I'm sorry, I did not get your name.
Rena.
Rena, thank you, Rena. What is the time frame that you're looking at getting that down for Mike and Jeanette?
We don't really have a time frame, so as soon as the permit is issued, we would start soon thereafter.
Okay.
Did Laura Ward put her camera on? I don't know if she had a question.
Yep. Laura, do you have a question?
Not a question, just a comment. Being that this is in the historic south side of Jefferson City, Old Munichburg, and the fact that we've lost so many of these log structures, I'm currently restoring an 1846 log cabin off of Broadway, behind this one. And it was termite damaged severely too. If I just don't feel comfortable approving this, being that we don't know the true history of this building. So therefore, I will not be supporting the demolition of this property.
Okay. All right.
May I add something else?
Please, so we can pick you up. There's really mics above you.
Gotcha. My company has taken down a lot of buildings for the city, the dangerous buildings. This house sits in such a visible area along Highway 50. And, if it doesn't get approved and the burn getters have to just sit on it, they purchased it to make it look better in the neighborhood where their business is. If it doesn't, it's just gonna sit there and then probably end up getting on the dangerous building list and come down eventually at the taxpayer's expense. So that's just one other thing I wanted to add.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, we will now close testimony. Rachel, do you have a staff report?
I just wanted to clarify, because there's been a lot of conversation about what to do. The Historic Preservation Commission does have the authority to impose conditions on demolition clearance review. They do not, however, have the authority to say who collects. So that would be if the property owners or depending on the contract with the demolition company, that is their prerogative to determine if that condition is imposed, where those
items.
architectural salvage would go. So you cannot issue a where it goes, but you can issue you can require that it is architectural salvage as a condition to the recommendation.
And whatever that is, it's at their expense, or if they work out with somebody who wants the.
It's entirely up to the property owner.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any other questions for Rachel?
Is it possible, Rachel, and I apologize to Mike and Jeanette, to delay the actual vote on this until we get exactly what the log cabin is?
So the Historic Preservation Commission has to make a decision. The applicant can request a continuance if they want to delay, but the commission can't delay the application.
Do you have any other sources to get any history on it, frankly?
I mean, there's always
Possibility.
There's
always possibility, but
yeah,
realistically though.
Yeah, and I
You said
think
Historic Preservation Commission or
Historic City of Jefferson,
did not
I
have
had somebody
anything.
looking at it, but they haven't been able to yet find anything, but I don't know how much time they've had a chance to look at it, 'cause it just came to me.
yeah, and just to add, when we research these properties, we start with kind of general Minmo GIS. We look at sandboard maps, the fire insurance maps. We look at census data. We look at the city directories. We have old hard copies at the library that fall apart every time you open them, but they're still there. They go back, I think, 1896. So, we do a lot. We also have an Ancestry.com account, a Newspapers.com account, so just to see if anything randomly pops up in the newspapers. And nothing for this property really popped up in the 30s and the 50s, both for property owners receiving DUIs. So, but that was it. So it's
a real positive. Thank you.
Well, because newspapers were great at that time because they told you what everybody was doing
And their address.
and their address. But really, it was quiet as far as the research goes. Is there always other options to dig deeper? Yeah, there are, but it would take a lot of time.
What about the abstract? Is there an abstract on this property? Because there was an abstract on our log cabin and it started all the way back to 1846.
I'm not sure. I did not look there.
Was there one obtained during closing?
They don't really do that anymore with title insurance very often.
Unfortunately, there's
Yeah,
very
if I have to
few.
go to
Unfortunately, there's
Coral
very few abstracts out there.
So as a clarification, how much of the current structure is the log cabin?
Did you say it was
Is it a
about
wall?
20 by
About 20
25?
by 25, it's just literally, you walk in the front door and go back
And it's
maybe
the
20
front
feet.
front
It's
square.
just that front rectangle.
Okay.
Is it a full room or just that front?
It's that right there. It's that room,
There's a divider, you see
that partition, right, and it goes on, so
It's
it's,
about 5 feet in the rooms.
Any other questions for Rachel? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion? Motion must be a positive format.
Make a motion to approve the request to demolish property located at 419 West Miller Street, Jefferson City, Missouri.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Don?
Laura?
No.
Brian?
Yes.
Dr. Boston?
yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Green? Yes. Ellen?
Yes. The motion carried.
I will get with you just so that we can verify what's there and what the possibilities are, if that's all right.
You want me to leave my number on the sign-in or?
I'll get you.
All right, thank you. Other business, HPF grant update.
I will send formal letters out for the applicants for your demolition recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time,
Let's give something.
thank you. A, other business, the calendar.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, Ellen, it's on the agenda.
Oh. You told me to use my script. Okay, other business, HPF 2024 calendar updates and nominations of officers.
Yes, so we're coming to that time of year. So at the next meeting, we'll go ahead and, since it's November, we'll keep in mind who you'd like as your chair and your vice chair. We'll do nominations in November and a vote in December. We'll also present a calendar for 2024 at the November meeting as well. To go ahead and get our dates set for the calendar year.
Can I ask you a
Yes.
question? You and Deborah, do you have any problem staying on as chair and vice chair?
I don't have an issue with it.
I don't have an issue.
There's your slate of candidates.
Unless you want a motion to approve.
Appropriate amount of time.
Well, we got it in tape now.
Okay, are you done with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, HPF grant updates.
Yes, we have our consultants from H3 Studios here to update us on the design guidelines, and he's hoping for vigorous conversation and active feedback. Here's your clicker.
Okay. And do we have something in our packet here for that?
It's not a PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's way down.
You have to.
Definitely pictures. Right, raise our taxes.
Give me my tablet.
Dawn's our IT person tonight.
I'm still
Sure,
learning.
that's working.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Great, well, thank you all. Again, just to remind you all, my name is Tim Bryan with H3 Studio. It's good to see you all again. The last time I was here was at the July meeting. And at that point in time, we presented to you the beginnings of the existing conditions analysis for the 4 districts that are part of the study, and got some feedback on general conditions, issues, and desired topics to address in the guidelines or design standards update. Since then, we prepared the SHPO mandated 30% draft. That's the first milestone for the project. That was, we submitted that to city staff for review. We had a meeting with our internal work session. I believe it was either on August 30th or September 1st. And then that was submitted to SHPO on Tuesday, September 5th. And you all should have received a copy of that submission along with the gaps analysis memo and the final existing conditions analysis presentation around that time. So what we're here to do tonight is to present what we're calling the 50% draft. That's not an official milestone, but we have done some additional work since the 30% submittal. based on feedback that we had gotten from our internal committee work session. And so what I'd like to do is kind of run through a summary of the presentation that's in your packet tonight. There are a couple of topics that we identified in conversations with Rachel and other city staff that we'd like to get some feedback on, as well as anything else that you would like to provide feedback on relative to the draft. So starting just kind of, again, refreshing everyone on the project background. I'm sure given your purview, you probably are familiar with this, but this is a grant-funded project really called for in the 2019 Jefferson City Historic Preservation Plan, as well as specific strategies from the 2040 Comprehensive Plan that was adopted in 2021. And it pertains to the two neighborhood conservation overlay districts, the one certified local historic district and the historic legacy district, those being the Capitol Avenue Neighborhood Conservation District, which was adopted in 2005, the School Street Certified Local Historic District, adopted in 2018, the Lafayette Historic Legacy District, adopted in 2022 with an asterisk, which I'll get to in a moment, and then the Lower Jefferson Neighborhood Conservation District from 2001. And within this, we're looking at guidelines for Capitol Avenue, School Street, and Lower Jefferson, because as you all are well aware, the Lafayette Historic Legacy District does not have guidelines associated with it. And the overall objective for this project is to update and standardize the design standards for those three districts to both address changes and new issues in the districts, as well as to ensure compliance or conformity with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. We also want to improve the clarity and transparency of the historic review and approval process for city staff, you all as members of the Historic Preservation Commission, and property owners alike. And finally, to make it easier to establish historic districts throughout Jefferson City by having a standardized set of guidelines from which to work. So in the gaps analysis, we identified a number of issues that we wanted to be sure to address in this process. First, citywide consistency. And we know the history behind this, but fundamentally the standards for the three districts that we're looking at are difficult, are different. There's not consistency between them, and that can make it, in our experience, difficult to administer review of projects. Conformance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Nothing in the existing standards contradicts the Secretary of the Interior standards, but there are issues that are either not addressed or they're not sufficiently clear. So we want to make sure to address that. Again, this issue of citywide applicability and extensibility, having a standardized set of design standards or design guidelines that people wishing to establish new historic districts can utilize. This issue of overly prescriptive standards versus overly flexible standards, again, that is kind of a subset of that citywide consistency, but we did find that when reviewing the existing standards. A great example of that, for instance, would be in the Capitol Avenue district, where there are very specific building elements that are required. You have to have three of a list of building elements on new infill construction, for example. And so that again might be very pertinent to that district, but it's not necessarily transferable to other parts of the city. Another issue, again, particularly in the Capitol Avenue district, is deference to underlying zoning, which can be to the detriment of the district's historic character, and that is one issue that we want to have a little bit more detailed conversation about tonight. And then periods of historic significance, those are not currently well defined in the standards, nor is the way in which projects are assessed based on their period of historic significance well defined. And finally, the issue of new construction of infill buildings versus the treatment of existing buildings. In many cases, And this is something that we find in a lot of communities. In many cases, those are covered by the same set of design standards. There's not a clarity between what happens with new infill construction versus dealing with existing structures. So we felt that that was a point of potential confusion or difficulty as well. Going back to this issue of kind of the overall design standards framework and what the project is trying to achieve. So currently, as you know, each of the districts, be it a certified local historic district, a neighborhood conservation overlay district, has a set of particular design standards individual to it. School Street has its standards. Capitol Avenue is in section 35-34B of the city code, and Lower Jefferson has its standards. Future districts would have to have their own standards essentially created from scratch using obviously best practices and precedents, but essentially created from scratch. The intent for this project is to basically look at commonalities between the design standards, address existing gaps, and create a set of citywide Jefferson City historic design standards, which could then have optional district-specific standards within them for districts. But this would then provide a standardized review and assessment criteria, which ideally will not only help in staff and the commission's review of projects and in property owners or developers ability to access to understand the requirements, but also could then be utilized in the creation of future districts by future groups. So the idea being that, again, we have a citywide set of standards, which, if necessary, can have district-specific standards within them, but that serves as kind of the basis for operation. So now I'll go through the 50% draft. As you know from having reviewed what the city sent out at the beginning of September, the new standards are essentially divided into 6 chapters, and we'll go through those kind of in outline format one by one, with some additional information on specific topics that we'd like your feedback on. So starting out, we wanted to create kind of a discrete preamble and introduction to the standards, which really sets up how they work, what the overall objective is, et cetera. So that would include, obviously, a table of contents, a section on the purpose and overview of this body, the Historic Preservation Commission, a section on working with the Historic Preservation Commission, and then an approval matrix for projects. We would also have a section describing the purpose and overview of the historic design standards. This is a section that utilizes content that's carried over from the existing standards and modified. We would have a new section outlining historic preservation tax credits, a section outlining the ongoing review and update of the design standards, a section dealing with public realm improvements within the districts, a section describing the limitations to the standards, and finally a references section. One key piece from this, and this is something that we were working, it was a recommendation that we had before we learned that the city is actually looking at a code update to better clarify the role of this body. But we do think that it is important, and we are very much in support of this initiative to institute a certificate of appropriateness process for the approval of projects dealing with historic properties. And we will ensure that in subsequent drafts that we are coordinating that language with the code update or the code amendment that the city is currently working on. But we feel that that will go a long way in helping to clarify what this body does and what an applicant gets back from this body. So we think that that's a really great idea, and we were pleased to see that that's already in process. One way that we can begin to think of that is, again, and this will be subject to further review, but we want to be very clear in the guidelines what the process is for approval. And so we've used this type of a flow chart in previous design standards where basically you lay out what are the steps based on different project types or different property eligibility. So is the property contributing, or, and I apologize, there's a typo there, it should say non-contributing. Then we identify the project type. Is a certificate of appropriateness required, yes or no? Is administrative approval permitted, yes or no? And then that puts you into whatever track you need to go through. So it kind of sets out clear expectations from the get-go from an owner's or developer's standpoint. Then moving into Chapter 2, this would be a new section that would summarize the historic character of Jefferson City. And much of the content in this section is adapted from the 2019 Owen and Eastlake report. So again, we felt that it was important that because that report covered all of the city of Jefferson and all of the various building types, we felt that that was important to, again, standardize the new design standards to that. So we would have an overview, a description of the periods of significance that exist within the city's historic districts, then an outline of all of the various building types and architectural styles, again, taken from that Owen and Eastlake report, and then a matrix of essentially correlating the districts, the periods of significance, and the building types, because obviously we only find certain periods of significance in certain building types in each of the districts. So again, just to kind of highlight some of that, the three periods of significance that are identified would be the Victorian period from 1840 to circa 1905, the early modern period, 1905 to 1940, and the mid-century modern period from 1940 to 1970, and then again, categorizing or classifying the existing building types between those periods of significance. And obviously, building types will many times fall into multiple periods of significance, but with different particulars in terms of their execution, their detailing, their features. Again, this is a way in general where you can begin to set up a framework for assessing properties without having to be so prescriptive in terms of specifying individual elements, which can make the standards ultimately more difficult to use from both an owner standpoint and a review standpoint. And by definition, the buildings, modifications, and features from the three primary periods of historic significance would be deemed to be contributing assets to the districts in which they are located. And by definition, then anything that isn't part of those periods of significance, one of those three periods of significance, would not be a contributing asset. And so that also then begins to set up a methodology by which individual properties can be assessed.
I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but I'm going to have to leave at 7. So,
yes, ma'am.
Am I remembering correctly? This is deliverable in February?
Yes, ma'am.
It's going to be finished in February.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm looking through here and I see all these chapters that said new section, new section. So the sections are already started.
They are already drafted, yes,
Okay.
and the specific draft language has already been submitted to SHPO as part of the 30% draft. So what will be
50% done with the actual document.
We're yes. In fact, I would say we might even be a little bit more than 50% done. The text is probably subject to some continued revisions. The text is probably more like 85-90% done, and what we're really now working on is getting all of the illustrations prepared and making that an easy to use document. So, but that's a great question. Thank you. So again, just examples of those periods of significance and some of the typical building types: Victorian, early modern, and mid-century modern. Chapter 3, this is also a new chapter dealing with historic urban design principles. So again, starting with an overview, then looking at the periods of significance as they relate to district urban design, looking at issues of building unity, building heights, corner sites, alignment, building width and spaces between buildings, landscaping of open lots, and streetscape and public realm improvements. And it's important to note that this section, these are standards or principles that are advisory. They're not required to be met for project approval, but really what they're intended to do is to set out to a user of the guidelines how buildings should relate to one another in the context of their neighbors, the block, et cetera. So it sort of provides a more holistic context for the particulars of the property-specific guidelines. And then Chapter 4 would include the standards for site design. This is an existing section with revisions. So it's divided into two main portions, 4.1 site design standards applicable to new buildings and additions to existing buildings, part of the primary facade only. And then 4.2 site design standards applicable to all buildings. So within 4.1, we deal with lots, building orientation, building siting, and building height, scale, and massing. And in section 4.2, driveways, parking location, parking number of parking spaces, loading and building service areas, landscaping and walkways, fences, front and side yards, or fences for front and side yards, fences for rear yards, accessory structures, outdoor lighting, and signage. This is one section where we want to talk about some specifics and get some feedback on, as you may have noticed in your packet. So we had a lengthy discussion about this when we met with the committee back at the end of August, because the issue of lots and lot consolidation is one of those issues where we feel that the deference to underlying zoning is potentially very detrimental to the character of the district. And in the 30% draft, we wrote the standards this way, where we state that consolidation of two or more lots into a single lot is discouraged, and then we set up conditions under which that consolidation can occur. The maximum width of a consolidated lot shall not exceed the average width of all lots in the block face, and it should never exceed 60 feet under any condition. And then likewise, a subdivision of a single lot into two or more lots shall be permitted if the lot to be subdivided has a width of 70 feet or greater, within conditions, again, about average block width, lots not being less than 35 feet and not exceeding 60 feet with a frontage on a public street. Now, in that conversation, the condition that was brought up was key, particularly the discussion around the Capitol Avenue district and the ability to make it possible to do larger scale projects, which are probably more feasible from an economic development standpoint. So if we look at, for instance, the 400 block of East Capitol, this is the north side of the block, looking at the existing buildings and the existing vacant lots. We could imagine a situation, for instance, where a series of corner lots were consolidated into a large lot for the construction of a multifamily dwelling or a mixed-use building. The issue with this, of course, is that the historic urban character of the block is detracted from due to non-contextual building size and massing. Likewise, you take a more extreme example where you might have an entire block that's consolidated. This is something that is very common in mixed-use urban developments currently, sort of a half a block long building. It becomes pretty financially feasible for the developer because of the scale. But again, in this case, the historic character of the block would essentially be completely destroyed due to a non-contextual building size and massing. So under the first option of a way to approach this is how we outlined it in the current guidelines, where basically, or the current draft of the guidelines, where essentially you would limit the width of parcels. If you were changing parcel sizes through consolidation or subdivision, you would set parameters of how small and how large those could be. And so Therefore, what you're doing is you're maintaining a contextual pattern and rhythm of building widths, and you're doing it primarily through lot dimensions and dimensional setback standards. This obviously would prohibit the construction of a large project without some sort of variance. Or the other way of doing it is that you could specify that contextual rhythm and character through building articulations through building design standards, using things like vertical plane breaks and at specified dimensional intervals or other elements, specifying certain variations in the height of the roof line, etc. And we see this as something that's being primarily governed by staff and commission interpretation and the administration of the design standards. So, obviously a solution like this has more teeth in it. It's a little more objective in terms of what can be done. Something like this allows more flexibility, but it's really dependent on kind of strong interpretation and enforcement of the building design standards. But again, it does allow for greater flexibility of larger projects. So this is something that we would like to get your input on because Rachel has informed us that there, particularly on city council, there is desire for some larger projects potentially on some of these larger sites, but those are fundamentally kind of non-historic styles and non-historic scale of buildings. So
does this plan here lean more toward some architectural detail? And
it would, yes. It would absolutely be more dependent on the way that the building was detailed and articulated. Yes. Which is difficult. I mean, it's difficult to get. It's difficult to sometimes get builders to follow that, and it's hard to enforce it sometimes. So.
Hear the cost too.
And it does increase the cost. Yes. Of course, something like this would potentially increase cost as well because you're dealing with smaller building footprints and, there's less of an economy of scale when a developer's building 5 or 6 buildings as opposed to a single building below. And I can take any thoughts you might have on it now, or we can hold any conversation to the end. It's really up to you.
Why don't we go ahead and, what are your thoughts on this?
And Rachel, in the city discussions, is this where it comes in the new conference center and what they're wanting to do down on Capitol Avenue?
So
I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but
right. So that wasn't Mayor Fitzwater.
Do you want to?
So Mayor Fitzwater was on the radio talking about a location of a new conference center, that it was no longer going to be at MSP, that it was going to be along Capitol Avenue. 400 block is not the site. I don't think I can share anything more at this time, but that I think there was a lot of confusion because that's where he said Capitol Avenue and that's where it went, but that is not the proposed site. So I think with these conversations, and with our consultant, it was really hard. Tim was asking about, what happens with the overlay with this 400 block, and really we don't know. We own some bits of property. We're still going through the condemnation case through the courts. Just based off of the conversations that were had during the RFP process of Capitol Avenue, there was conversations towards infill, towards doing kind of these larger assemblage projects where you have a larger development there. Just lots of conversations. So one of the exercises that we talked about was, what does that look like? What does that mean for the overlay? What does that mean for Capitol Avenue at that 400 block? Taking the preservation hat off, you have the 400 block is this, you can either extend your downtown or you can keep it historic and maintain, or you could do like a little bit of extension of downtown and create like some sort of buffer. There's a lot of options because of where it's at and some of the other properties that are surrounding it. So we just wanted to go through the exercise of just what options do we have? What are our choices? And that's what I think that we're talking about right now.
So is this come up in city council then about doing the convention center, or is this just him talking?
Mayor Fitzwater was on the radio.
I've heard that.
But I don't, the conversations about.
This is his conversation, not something that's come from the.
Correct.
I don't think it's right, the venue, I think anyone was expecting to talk about the conference center in. So it's kind of one of those things, it's out there a little bit, but I think I've just doubled down on what Rachel had said, and this is certainly not the location for that, so I don't think it's probably going to enter into the conversation of this area that's currently in conservation.
I guess my concern with all of this is, whatever the future of Capitol Avenue is, it's spotty. There's some really fabulous buildings, but due to all kinds of reasons, it's spotty. So you'll have a great building, 3 empty lots, great building. And I think my concern is if we go to the point where we say, okay, we're gonna allow large-scale development in this area, it has to be articulated whatever way, especially with the last one, is that, well, we can't do that if these 4 historic buildings are still here. So, as a property owner, I'm just gonna let it run down, and the city's gonna tear it down, and then I can sell it to a developer, and then they can put in their big thing. So, my question is, what are we doing in this area to encourage the rehabilitation of as many properties as possible, and then how do we make compatible whatever construction is doing? That's where my concern lies.
And my response to that would be that from a strictly from the standpoint of historic preservation of the district, which is what we're doing in this project. Doing something where you limit the size of lot consolidations is going to have the most positive effect on preserving the existing teeth and filling in the missing spots. Because you're absolutely right. If it's something like this, yes, it may have a better character from the street, but it's going to naturally incentivize lot consolidation because a project of this scale is a lot more economically feasible for a developer to build than a smaller building.
I guess one question I have is, whenever I look through these models, there's not a model that fits in with the existing historic properties that are there. Everything on this looks like you're
sure and
down and putting something else up.
No, and that's a good point. I mean, because this model could absolutely be, you could essentially take, just jump ahead here.
But one problem with that, though, go back to that. Some of those lots are too narrow to be built on, so you're gonna have to consolidate the lots.
So that's another good point, and I think that so this I think becomes a question also for the city staff of the issue of non-conforming lots in these historic districts, lots that are too narrow under their current underlying zoning. That is a huge issue.
There's lots out there that are less than 40 foot.
Right. And I think that, it's not, I mean, there are plenty of precedents of having narrower setbacks and allowing building. I mean, yes, obviously you're going to be limited to the type of building you can build, but there's plenty of precedents in historic districts in St. Louis and all other kinds of, and many other cities where you permit that type of infill development, and it's of historic character. The major gap in this context is that there's no mechanism in the underlying zoning to permit that. So does there need to be a zoning overlay as well to this as a secondary point to allow those narrower lots to perhaps allow conforming lots down to 35 feet in certain areas, or whatever the case may be?
Well, I'm certainly in favor of taking the step to protect as much as possible, even with allowing with some lot consolidation, because it's hard to build on a 25 or 35 foot lot, but to err toward the side of preserving the character of the district that versus what you said, incentivizing continued demolition. Because just as a general comment, I feel like, you know, that the code enforcement is, we wait until it's time to be demolished and we say it's a hazardous building. That just seems to be the pattern. And I think that's a pattern that needs to be broken to incentivize. What we really need is residential development and smaller scale residential, affordable housing development. And you can afford a small house on a small lot more than you can afford a McMansion. And that's where we're not there in our city yet. That's where we kind of need to go. So, like I said, I err on the side of preserving the character of the district versus incentivizing mass. You know,
Piggyback off what Tiffany's saying, I was involved in a survey this past spring about why do people come to Jefferson City who weren't from here, particularly younger people, and it was consistently very much the same in regards to themes, and housing was one of them. I mean, when I first moved here and I said I wanted to live in Jeff City, my real estate agent laughed at me. Several real estate agents laughed at me. He was like, "What's your budget?" "Oh, sweetie." And I was like, "What?" Like, and I mean, I didn't have like a $30,000 budget. I had like a decent budget for this area, but they were like, "No." And I thought maybe they were just trying to push me elsewhere to get more higher commission. But then looking at some of the houses, I was like, "What?" Like, we need, and I mean, I'm running into this with my colleagues who are coming to Lincoln University and being like, "Okay, I want to buy a house for my family. I want to start a family here. I want to, you know, put down roots." And they're running into the exact same thing where they're like, "Oh, you weren't kidding." You know, like I'm now starting laughing at people being like, "Yeah, there's nothing here." So anything that's going to encourage a larger structure that's either like a McMansion, which I don't think would go down there, but more so a larger commercial area. We've got plenty of commercial areas throughout the city that are abandoned right now, not being filled, including in downtown. We don't need more of that, I don't think. What we need is housing, because we're not going to get any businesses if we don't have workers. We can't have workers if we don't have places to live.
I'm trying to figure out how to word this. If we come up, HPC comes up with these design standards, and say we go with this, you know, drawing like this, and, you know, we're talking about maybe combining some of the smaller lots so that it makes a buildable lot. What keeps city council or whoever the next step is from saying, "Oh no, we want to just wipe this out, we want to do something"? How is...
There's always a possibility with everything.
I know, but we're going through so much of a process to get this done. You know, I
understand Donna's concerns. It's why are we doing all this work if city council is just going to be like,
Well, but
throw all the chess pieces off the chessboard.
we're one piece of the puzzle that goes into it. The one thing that I think about Capitol Avenue always is it's always been a mix of, there's worship, there's businesses, there's residential. I've always thought that was one of the interesting things about Capitol Avenue, that it was a mixed demographic across there.
Right.
Is there a possibility of doing one of these models that entails the historic properties with filling in where the structures are gone now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, so, and the way that I think that works in the guidelines is how we've done it in the 30% draft, where you set up, you permit lot consolidations and subdivisions, but but only according to certain parameters. So you limit how wide they can be, you limit how narrow they can be. I think the other piece of the puzzle that's outside of the direct purview of this is having some kind of a zoning overlay that permits by right building on narrower lots, on lots of record. I think that's really important. That's something that we can certainly incorporate into the historic design standards as an advisory piece, but ultimately that's something that's going to have to be done through zoning. That's kind of the missing key to making all of this work. But yeah, absolutely, and we can absolutely model a few permutations of that with what if you just infilled all these lots? What if you consolidated? What if you took that? Like, would it be? It doesn't seem like it would be out of scale if those 3 lots were consolidated. I mean, that's about the same width as where the funeral home is, or you divided it, you consolidated into 2 lots, something like that. So yeah, we can absolutely show a couple versions of that. I think that would be very helpful.
I do like the recommendation of allowing zoning areas where narrow lots are permitted, because this is not the only neighborhood with very narrow lots.
Correct.
There are 25, 35-foot lots in many neighborhoods.
Correct. And not to be critical of the city's zoning code, but it's fundamentally a suburban zoning code that's been applied over a lot of historic neighborhoods. So you're going to run into those issues, absolutely.
Well, I'd say one thing about the zoning, though. If you're looking at those lots 25 to 30 foot wide, you're going to run into fire code issues. That you have to have certain separation if your buildings aren't touching it. So usually what you see is a transition then to attached buildings, which is what I think we were looking at a minute ago. That becomes a little more feasible when you have lots that are more 30 foot in width. So you could look at like a single family attached on lots of narrows, but it's going to be a little more difficult, though, to have standalone detached buildings on lots that narrow.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's great feedback. I appreciate all of that discussion. Any other thoughts on this before we move on to the rest of the sections? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so then, moving on from the site design standards, then the last 2 chapters, Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, are standards for existing buildings and standards for new construction, respectively. So within standards for existing buildings, again, we start off with a discussion of the periods of significance. The idea here is that we want to set up within the standards a specified process of how buildings are assessed and therefore reviewed, that isn't so prescriptive in terms of like details or features or elements, but rather is talks about identifying what era the building is from, what type of building it is, and then using that as essentially the template for any work. And then exterior alterations, rehabs, and renovations. That is an existing section carried forward and modified. The same with additions which are not part of the primary facade, and then additions which are part of the primary facade. A section dealing specifically with porches, which is also existing, and then new sections dealing with parapets and cornices as applicable. A section specific to windows, to primary doors, secondary doors, storefronts, awnings and marquees, decks and exterior staircases as applicable, and then existing content carried over and modified for details and decorative elements, utility connections, a new section for mechanical equipment, a new section for signage, modified section for building materials, new section for color, for exterior building lighting, for sustainability and energy, and for maintenance and management. Talking specifically about the periods of historic significance, because this is one of the main additions to this. So the way that we've outlined this is that essentially there's every building has a primary period of historic significance, and that could be, it's typically from one period, and the purpose is when you're doing a project on an existing building, you identify that. It's clearly specified in the guidelines what those periods are, so you identify it, and then you utilize precedents from that period to guide the renovation of the building. Where it becomes more complicated is when buildings have been added onto, as many have. So we discuss additions and modifications in two forms. There are additions, later additions, that are from other primary periods of historic significance. So, for example, a Victorian building may have been added onto in the early modern period, and that addition is still historically significant to the building. So we want to make sure that we provide guidance, and that's what these standards do in terms of provide guidance of identifying those contributing modifications, because if it is a contributing modification, then it's deemed a contributing feature to the building. Modifications outside of primary periods of historic significance would not be considered contributing modifications. So then the idea being that those would be treated in a different way, and in fact could determine whether the building was even still a contributing asset to the district or not. So standards pertaining to this, rehabs and renovations must remain faithful to the materials, methods, and details of the building's period of historic significance. Contributing modifications that are of a different primary period of historic significance in the underlying building should be treated as part of the building's historic condition and preserved in situ. Should the building owner wish to remove a later contributing modification, the owner must demonstrate that the restoration of the building to an earlier condition will improve the building's overall character and quality and provide documentation of historical evidence of the original condition of the building. So obviously, if you have a photograph of a building from when it was only a few years old and it clearly shows something different, that's something different than someone just speculating about, it would be better if this later modification was removed. And then owners of buildings with non-contributing modifications undertake a significant renovation are required to remediate these non-contributing modifications, with the exception of building additions. Restore the building to a condition of historic significance. Owners of buildings with non-contributing modifications undertaking minor renovations are encouraged to remediate non-contributing modifications. Standard 5.2.6, do not remove later contributing additions, features, or modifications to create a false sense of history. And finally, and this is probably one of the most important in terms of compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards, do not add historically styled elements to a building that are not supported by historic documentation or forensic evidence to create a false sense of history. So the intent is that by essentially setting out a process to assess and design buildings by, as opposed to setting out a prescriptive list of elements, you both make the guidelines more apt to preserve historic character, as well as you make them easier and more applicable to other districts in the city, because essentially you're always keying this to the underlying conditions of the building. And then finally, the last chapter, this would be standards for new buildings in historic districts. And again, this covers many of the same topics or standard areas as Chapter 5, with obviously anything relating to an existing structure or a period of historic significance being removed. So again, here we're dealing with porches, parapets and cornices, windows, primary and secondary doors, storefronts, awnings and marquees, decks and exterior staircases, details and decorative elements, utility connections, mechanical equipment, signage, materials, color, exterior lighting, and sustainability and energy. So we think that and we really recommend this as a strategy, that by separating the standards dealing with existing buildings from the standards dealing with infill structures, you provide a better clarity. And so, for instance, in Chapter 6, this would be an instance where and this is how the current 30% draft is written, there clearly was a lot of foresight and a lot of thought put into the requirements in the Capitol Avenue district for requiring new buildings to have these different historic elements. We think that's perfectly fine, and that is currently written into the draft, but it's specific to the Capitol Avenue district. Any other district that wished to add district-specific requirements like that for new buildings could put them in here. And so therefore you can have, you can calibrate on a district-by-district basis these general standards to address particular character, like with Capitol Avenue, you have Victorian structures with some very specific design elements and details. So that can all still be accommodated, but you're setting out a citywide kind of baseline for dealing with infill construction in historic districts. So I think, yes, that is the end of the presentation. So any other thoughts or feedback, anything from your review of the documents that were distributed in the beginning of September that you'd like to bring forward tonight, or that we need to address as we continue on with our work?
Anybody?
As new guidelines come out from, I'm just reading from the new guidelines that just came out from use of substitute materials and that kind of stuff, any of that will be incorporated in what you've got here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That was just announced today, I know.
Yeah, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, next thing, Phase 2 West Main Survey.
Yes, so the Phase 2 West Main survey, there's been a little bit of back and forth with our consultants and the SHPO. This was random.
I don't know how that got in
Yeah,
there.
I've got one too.
Oh, okay.
If anybody has a
One of
Rick
mine.
Hurst bank statement, just pass it on down. Just give it to the mic.
Said you have a lot of money in there.
The Phase 2 West Main survey, there's a little bit of back and forth between our consultant and the SHPO. The DNR guidelines are out there and our consultant is following them to a T, but the SHPO wants a little bit more detail and our consultant is wanting to stick to the DNR guidelines. So there may be project extension on this one, a grant extension, just to kind of give us time to work out some of those issues, because understandably they don't want to fill out all the survey forms and have to go back and recorrect. So we're at the stage where the SHPO requests 5 sample survey forms before they have the consultant fill out the rest of them, and that's where we're at right now is haggling over those 5 forms. So we'll continue to work on it. It's a city staff with the consultant with the SHPO staff. So as soon as we have a resolution, but they've done all their field work, they're ready to go. It's just the conversation about the forms. So we'll continue to update this commission monthly as we move through that project.
Next, MSP updates.
Yeah, I don't have as much as I thought I would by this time. We do have, I will note that we did terminate the EDA grant for convenience. We had the $1.5 million from EDA to build out infrastructure to support a hotel and conference center. And we really worked with, that grant was awarded right before COVID started, or actually it was, we applied right before COVID started. And being able to do a development in the middle of a pandemic, then the One Health Lab coming in, which we as a city were very excited for, but the timelines were not in the best interest of EDA or the city, so we elected to terminate for convenience, and that will allow us to reach out to EDA for future funding and even for that site potentially. So there's opportunity there. We do still have the community revitalization grant through the Department of Economic Development, their ARPA funds that they received. So we are actively working with the state of Missouri to figure out how we could deploy $2.1 million to the site. We'll see where that goes. I will say that there will be some demolition. Housing Unit 2 is leaning, visibly leaning. And then that's the red brick structure that's closer to Capitol Avenue. And then also the Saddle Tree Factory is starting to actively slough off, if that's the official term.
One down close to the river.
That's the, a lot of people call it the shoe factory. That's kind of the one tucked down the hill a little bit. So we were talking about those demolitions specifically. I think those are definitely on the slate, but the rest of it is somewhat up in the air. Our new city administrator, Brian Crane, is having a meeting with the state tomorrow. And we'll just keep having these conversations until we figure out what's going to happen with NSP.
Third revision?
Yes, do any of our committee members want to share?
Go ahead, you can be more succinct than I am.
You can give the update.
Okay.
We approved most of it.
Yeah, so we reconvened the stakeholders committee last October 5th, I think, last Thursday. And we really, from the last meeting that we had almost a year ago, we had a draft, and then when we ran it through the internal processes, we had some issues with appeals specifically. And so we made those updates and then gave Clint, Director Smith, the ability to add his comments and also other comments. And so we went through back to the stakeholders committee. We have a few changes that we're going to make and then reformat it. And then we're going to put it out for a public comment period with the stakeholder group. So Historic City of Jefferson, we're going to ask for them, as well as the Board of Realtors and any other stakeholders. So if you have stakeholders that you think would be interested in commenting on the draft, please let me know, and we'll make sure we send it directly to them. And then once we get done with the public comment period, we'll start running through the approval process. And what that will look like is bringing it before this body, the Historic Preservation Commission, and then to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then to council. Possibly put Public Works and Planning before council.
Public comment? Dates to remember, next meeting is November 14th, 2023. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
So move. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, I thought I heard somebody over there say something, so.
Donna did.
Yeah. Huh? I don't know.
Seconded.
Yeah.